There is a moment, captured on video and now watched millions of times online, where a woman walks onto the Emmy stage holding a cane in one hand and the arm of a talk show host in the other. The theme song of a sitcom that ended nearly 3 decades earlier plays over the speakers. And the entire room stands up. That woman is Christina Applegate. That sitcom is married, with children. And behind that moment sits one of the longest, most quietly loyal relationships in television history. The one between Applegate and her TV father, Ed O'Neill. This isn't a story about secrets or scandal. It's a story that's been told piece by piece, in Applegate's own words, on her podcast, in interviews, and in her 2026 memoir. Here is what she has actually said. When Married, with Children premiered on the fledgling Fox network in 1987, Christina Applegate was a teenager stepping into a role that would define the first act of her career. She played Kelly Bundy, the dim, big-haired, endlessly mocked daughter of Al and Peggy Bundy. Ed O'Neill played Al, a shoe salesman with a hatred of his job, his wife, and his life, delivered with a deadpan so dry it became its own art form. The show was designed to be everything network television wasn't at the time. Crude, cynical, unapologetically anti-family in a decade that still worshipped the Cosbys and the Keatons. It worked. Married, with Children ran for 11 seasons, becoming one of Fox's first true hits and helping put the network on the map. For Applegate, growing up largely on that set meant something specific. She has said publicly that she has known Ed O'Neill since she was a teenager, and that their relationship, built over 11 years of daily work together, became something that outlasted the show itself by decades. The clearest, most direct account of their relationship doesn't come from tabloid speculation. It comes from Applegate's own podcast. In August 2024, she invited O'Neill onto Messy, the show she co-hosts with fellow actress Jamie Lynn Sigler, who also lives with multiple sclerosis. What she said introducing him has been quoted widely, and for good reason. It's about as candid a description of the relationship as exists on record. "I don't even know how to explain this person," she told her audience. "He raised me, so if you don't like anything about me, it's his fault." She added, only half joking, "If you do like anything about me, also his fault." Then, without the joke, "Years and years of my life spent with this man, and he's an incredible actor. He's an incredible human being." That single word, raised, is doing a lot of work. Applegate wasn't describing a co-star she got along with. She was describing someone who filled a formative role in her life during the years she spent becoming an adult on that soundstage. In a separate conversation, she went further, telling O'Neill directly that he went through everything with her, including her mother's cancer diagnosis and other difficulties she faced during those years. What makes the relationship notable isn't just its origin. It's that it never really ended. On that same podcast episode, Applegate described what their friendship looks like now, more than 25 years after the show wrapped. "I love our relationship now, Eddie," she said. "The fact that you and I can talk on the phone for hours and giggle and talk about everything. I talk to you more than I talk to anyone else on the telephone. I really do. 'Cause I hate talking on the telephone, but I'll get on with him." In her 2026 memoir, she put a number on it, writing that she talks to O'Neill roughly once a week, a habit that has apparently held steady for years. For his part, O'Neill has echoed the sentiment in his own way, though more sparingly, in keeping with his famously private nature about family matters. Speaking on the same podcast in a later appearance, he reflected on fatherhood generally, crediting his own father as a model. "He was a good guy. He was a good father, a great father. That could ruin a whole life if that position's not filled well." It's a line that reads differently once you know it came from the man Applegate says raised her on set. To understand why this particular friendship carries so much weight, it helps to understand how much of both of their lives has played out on camera. Christina Applegate has said she has been working since she was 3 years old, and her earliest credited role came as an infant on the soap opera Days of Our Lives, a fact she brought up, half joking, in one of her Emmy speeches decades later. By the time Married, with Children cast her as Kelly Bundy, she was already a working child actor with years of on-set experience. But nothing had prepared her for the scale of the show she was about to join, or the fact that it would consume the next 11 years of her adolescence and young adulthood. Ed O'Neill came to the role of Al Bundy from a different direction entirely. Before Married with Children, he had spent years working as a stage and character actor, building the kind of grounded, comic timing that would later define Al Bundy's weary, sarcastic delivery. He was in his early 40s when the show began, old enough to have already lived through the industry's ups and downs, and by Applegate's account, experienced enough to recognize when a much younger colleague needed someone steady nearby. After Married with Children ended, both of their careers took very different paths, and both found major second acts. Applegate moved into film and prestige television, earning an Emmy for a guest role on Friends in 2003, and going on to star in films like The Sweetest Thing, Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, along with television roles in Samantha Who? And later, the acclaimed Netflix dark comedy Dead to Me, which brought her a string of award nominations. O'Neill, meanwhile, became known to an entirely new generation as Jay Pritchett on Modern Family, a role that ran for 11 seasons, the same length as Married with Children, and won him multiple award nominations of his own. It's worth noting that Applegate's 2021 MS diagnosis wasn't the first serious health battle she'd faced in public. In 2008, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent a double mastectomy, a decision she made in part because she carries the BRCA1 gene mutation, which significantly raises the risk of the disease. That experience led her to found Right Action for Women, a nonprofit that helps provide breast MRI screenings for women considered high risk, particularly those under 45 with a family history of the disease. In other words, by the time MS entered her life in 2021, Applegate had already spent over a decade being publicly candid about a life-altering diagnosis, which may help explain why she chose to be so direct about this one as well. If there's a genuine crisis in the Married with Children story, it isn't a secret scandal. It's a well-documented one. In January 1989, a Michigan homemaker named Terry Ricalta watched a Season 3 episode called Her Cups Runneth Over, which featured a storyline about Al Bundy shopping for his wife's bra and a background shot of a nude model. Ricalta was offended enough to write letters to the show's advertisers, and several of them, including major national brands, pulled their sponsorships in response. The controversy became national news. Ricalta appeared on television talk shows to press her case, and for a moment Married with Children's future looked genuinely uncertain. Fox's response was to move the show's time slot and quietly tone down some of its content, and one episode from that same season, I'll See You in Court, was pulled and didn't air in the U.S. until 2002, more than a decade later. But the boycott is remembered today mostly for how badly it backfired. The publicity made curious viewers tune in to see what all the fuss was about, and the show's ratings climbed. Within about a year, most of the advertisers who had pulled out had quietly returned. It's a genuinely useful case study in the unpredictable economics of moral outrage, and it's one of the few moments in the show's history that actually threatened its survival, long before anyone involved had a Wikipedia page. Married with Children didn't get the send-off many long-running sitcoms receive. When Fox canceled the show in 1997 after 11 seasons, there was no farewell episode built around it. The show simply stopped. Applegate has talked about how disorienting that was, and how the cast wasn't even given a heads-up through official channels. "We should have been gearing up to a moment to say goodbye," she said in a conversation with O'Neill on Messy, recalling how she actually learned the show had ended. "I found out from a guy who knew a guy who worked for my assistant at the time. That's how I found out. They never called us." It's a small detail, but it says something about how corporate and impersonal the end of an 11-year chapter of someone's life can be, even when that chapter helped build a television network. What didn't disappear when the camera stopped, according to Applegate, was the relationship she'd built with O'Neill. The two stayed in each other's lives through the years that followed, through her rising film career in movies like The Sweetest Thing and Anchorman, through her television work on Samantha Who? And later Dead to Me, and through O'Neill's own second act as Jay Pritchett on Modern Family, a role that introduced him to an entirely new generation of viewers and earned him a fresh round of awards recognition. On August 10, 2021, Applegate posted a message that stunned her fans. "Hi friends," she wrote. "A few months ago, I was diagnosed with MS. It's been a strange journey, but I have been so supported by people that I know who also have this condition. It's been a tough road. But as we all know, the road keeps going." She closed by asking for privacy as she adjusted to her new reality. She later revealed that the diagnosis came while she was filming the third and final season of her Netflix series Dead to Me, and that the symptoms had actually started well before that. Small numbness in her toes that she initially brushed off before it progressed to the point where her legs would give out on set and she was eventually being moved around by wheelchair between takes. In interviews since, she said she believes the disease had likely been present in some form for years before her official diagnosis. Multiple sclerosis is a chronic autoimmune condition in which the immune system attacks the protective coating around nerve fibers in the brain and spinal cord. It affects everyone differently, but common symptoms include problems with mobility, balance, vision, and fatigue. There is currently no cure, though treatments exist to manage symptoms and slow progression. For Applegate, the diagnosis reshaped nearly everything about her life and career. She has said she now uses a cane, has experienced what she calls cognitive fog, and eventually stepped back from acting almost entirely. In her memoir, released in March 2026, she's been unflinching about how much of her life has narrowed as a result, describing long stretches spent largely in bed, and how painful even small movements can be on difficult days. What followed the diagnosis wasn't withdrawal, at least not entirely. In November 2022, Applegate made her first major public appearance since going public with her MS, attending the ceremony where she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She leaned into her own dark humor for the occasion, telling the crowd, "Oh, by the way, I have a disease. Did you not notice? I'm not even wearing shoes." 14 months later, in January 2024, at what was technically the delayed 75th Emmy Awards, pushed back by industry strikes, Applegate walked onto the Emmy stage as a presenter, using a cane and leaning on host Anthony Anderson's arm. The room rose to its feet, Applegate visibly emotional, thanked the crowd before deploying her trademark humor to cut the tension. "You're totally shaming me with a disability by standing up," she joked. "It's fine." Later in the same appearance, she added a line about her own physical appearance that got one of the biggest laughs of the night. "Body not by Ozempic." She returned to present again at the 2024 ceremony months later, once more met with a standing ovation, once more turning to comedy to manage the moment, this time joking about shaming the audience for standing again. She used the appearance to run through her decades-long resume, from her earliest work as an infant on Days of Our Lives through Married, with Children, Samantha Who, and what she has called probably her last acting role, Dead to Me. Throughout this period, Applegate has been candid that acting itself has become close to impossible for her. She's spoken about the physical demands of a film or television set, long days, physical blocking, standing for hours, as things her body largely can't sustain anymore. Speaking to the Los Angeles Times ahead of the 2023 SAG Awards, she said plainly, "It's my last awards show as an actor probably, so it's kind of big deal. Right now, I couldn't imagine getting up at 5 a.m. and spending 12 to 14 hours on a set. I don't have that in me at this moment." She has floated the idea of shifting toward producing or voice work instead, partly, she said, to make sure she can keep supporting her daughter, Sadie Grace. That SAG Awards appearance in February 2023 became its own small moment of public defiance. Applegate walked the red carpet with a black cane bearing the message FUMS in bold letters, alongside her daughter's name. She attended with Sadie, then 12, in a matching outfit, a detail that captured something Applegate has returned to often in interviews since: how much of her MS journey has been watched and absorbed by her daughter. She said Sadie only ever knew her as an active, healthy parent before 2021, and that adjusting to a mother who sometimes can't make it down the hallway to say goodnight has been genuinely hard on her. Applegate has also been open that her relationship to her own body and career didn't begin with MS. Her 2026 memoir traces a difficult childhood in the Laurel Canyon music scene of the 1970s, an abusive early relationship, and years of body dysmorphia that shadowed her rise to fame, context that adds weight to why she's described the people who steadied her, including O'Neill, as more than just industry colleagues. Throughout all of this, Applegate's account of her relationship with O'Neill hasn't changed in substance. He simply remained a constant presence, the way he apparently has been since she was a teenager on that set. She's described him as someone who went through everything with her, not just her illness, but earlier hardships too, including her mother's cancer. The rest of the original married. With children, cast has stayed connected as well. Applegate has spoken warmly about her bond with Katie Sagal, who played her mother Peggy, and about the sibling-like relationship she developed with David Faustino, who played her brother Bud, during the years they grew up together on set. But it's the relationship with O'Neill, the one she keeps returning to, on her podcast and in her memoir, that seems to carry the most weight for her. That's consistent with what she has publicly said is now a near-weekly ritual. A phone call with the man she says raised her. Not a press appearance. Not a red carpet moment. A regular, ordinary phone call, sustained across nearly 4 decades, between two people who happened to meet on a soundstage when one of them was a teenager and the other was an established actor in his 40s. There's no shortage of nostalgia around Married, with children, and periodically, talk of a reunion resurfaces. The cast has taken part in retrospective panels and anniversary events over